Welcome to the Easy Speak Speakeasy.
You've unlocked the door to unfiltered mental health and wellness conversations.
Perfect.
All right.
Here we are again.
Here we are.
Easy Speak. Episode 15.
Yes.
Stars and Shadows. I think we should say from the beginning a disclaimer that today we're going to be talking about heavy topic.
Yes.
And so right from the beginning, we just want to remind people that if you feel upset or this conversation in some way causes you to have any sort of mental health needs arise or feelings of like a crisis, you can always contact 688.
988.
988?
Yes.
What is wrong with me lately with these numbers?
There's just so many.
Yes.
There's so many now.
But honestly?
Yeah.
Anyways, you can contact 988.
Yes.
For emergency mental health response, or always 911. If you have a mental health provider in your life, you can contact your mental health provider, or if you have a crisis plan, you can do that. And then also at the end of this podcast, we always have a meditation moment.
Yes.
So you can always fast forward to the very end of this if you need to just take a second and breathe.
Yes.
And have some nice music along with that. And then you can always come back later. And as always, we'll have lots of resources in our podcast description. So there'll be more of all of what I'm saying and then some.
Yes.
That you can easily access.
Yeah, super important. And, you know, if you need to take a pause and come back later, that's the beauty of being able to listen.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our podcast name today is Stars and Shadows.
Yep.
And we decided to do this episode rather quickly because there have been a few recent deaths by suicide amongst celebrities or well-known people. And a lot of those have been of people who are younger. And so we thought that it's important to have a quick conversation about what's happening, what's going on out there. And, you know, this is what we're here for, is to have these honest conversations that are just straightforward and without kind of barriers. I think we always try to infuse like love and light into all conversations, even difficult ones. So hopefully along the way we find a few moments of that. But we are at the Speakeasy, so I think we should have a cheers to everyone's like journey with their mental health. And a special cheers to those who have lost their lives earlier than their families probably expected, and probably than they even expected themselves. So let's have a quick cheers to them.
Cheers to them.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And thank you for making this drink today, Dahyana.
You're welcome. How was it?
It's really good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good.
I also want to say, like, I think
Experimenting.
you were experimenting?
Yeah, with the drink today.
Worked out good.
Awesome.
I also want to just say that I think when it comes to drinking and mental health, a lot of times people say to us like, oh, you're going to drink on your mental health podcast. And even with things related to death, so much of the healing that people do related to when somebody passes on, regardless of what that reason is, there's so many different cultures that it revolves around drinking or celebrations of life, different kinds of alcohol and toasts and all of these kinds of things. And so I think like this is one of those like stigma that we're trying to break, you know, that you can have a cocktail and have a conversation about what's happening and it not be something that's negative.
Right.
You know, that everything most things done, with thoughtfulness and not overdoing it it can be done nicely and not in a hurtful way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think when it comes to this topic, it's a really hard topic to talk about for several reasons. One, whenever anyone loses their life, it's a challenge, right? Especially when people die by suicide, it ripples throughout the community. And I think it always highlights for me, just how salient stigma can be, and for a lot of people who are struggling, they're screaming, but it's like they're underwater, right? And one of the things that we do is we do lots of trainings and help people to understand, signs and symptoms, so that, if someone in their life is struggling and they're screaming underwater, that you know what to look for to find that. You know that air bubbles on the surface means that something deeper is going on, But, I think it's just one of those things that is always so shocking. And what I am always contending with is the folks who are left behind, right? I think there's always this emanating sense of like guilt that happens for a lot of folks who are survivors of a situation like that. So, I think we could delve deeper, but I always like to make sure that if anyone is listening and they've, had somebody that they love die by suicide, that they know that, any feelings of guilt are normal, and also it's not your fault. And, I think that is something that a lot of people grapple with, like, oh, why didn't I notice? Maybe I should have tried harder. Maybe I should have called, another time. And so, yeah.
I think, for me, so maybe we should talk about the death that just occurred, that triggered us to have this conversation. I said my non-word word, which is triggered.
Yes.
Prompted us to have this conversation. I didn't watch the show that he was on. Did you watch it?
Yeah, Euphoria is so good.
Okay.
So I'm like waiting for the next season. It's so good.
So do you know a little bit about him?
I don't know very much about him. I know that he played a character.
What's his name again?
Angus Cloud.
Okay.
I know that he played a character that seemed pretty similar to, like, personality-wise, to who he was as an individual. I mean, I loved his character on Euphoria. He was technically like a drug dealer, but he was like so super chill and like had so much empathy, and like, that dude like you always wanted to like hang around with, had seen way too much and had to do way too much to survive, but like still was like human, and I remember when I saw the news yesterday, I remember feeling like, oh, like that familiar, all too familiar at this point, like heart-sinking moment of like, ugh, like somebody else has lost their battle with mental health, right? But then I also had another thought, which was, I had seen an interview that he did several months ago, like a clip of an interview that he did on a red carpet somewhere, went viral. And his demeanor, the way that he was presenting, was prompting a lot of like, like humor, right? Like it's the internet, right? So people are going to say things, they're going to spin things to make it funny, or to try to make themselves relevant, right? But like the comments were very much like, oh my God, like he's just as high as like he is on Euphoria, or like they're the same people, right? And I remember watching that interview thinking like, oh my gosh, he's struggling. And like, he's also like in the spotlight on, this interviewer is asking him, it was like a pretty basic question, and the way he responded was in a very disconnected way. But like people took that as like, oh, it's just his personality, right? Kind of like how Keanu Reeves just like automatically is seen as like a dumb surfer guy because he's always played that in the movies. And so people saw him,
even though he's one of the most enlightened people.
smart, down to earth, right? Like gives away all his money.
Yeah, he
but
was
like,
sort of starting to be seen as the character that he played.
Exactly.
The human that he is.
Exactly, and I think that's what happened, you know, with that. But I remember, because I have years of training, you know, in mental health, like I saw that, and I remember thinking to myself, oh, another celebrity who's like really struggling and like not happy. And so when I saw the news yesterday, I wasn't surprised, but I still had that like crushing, sinking feeling, you know.
And then I read that his dad passed away about a week ago.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So compounding factors, or perhaps,
Grief.
I don't know what happened with his dad's passing, but if he was going through, you know, mourning of, you know, maybe if his dad was ill, you know, and he's been working through preparing to lose his dad, you know, grief is such an indicator of mental health challenges on the spectrum of where people can be. Yeah,
I didn't realize that. That's so sad. And so this poor family has lost two really important people in their lives a week apart. That's really challenging. Yeah.
I think it's especially shocking, I guess is the word, to the world when somebody who was very young dies by suicide. You know, I can remember points in my life growing up where somebody who was close to my age died by suicide, right? I think the one that for me hit first when I first was like, what's happening, was Kurt Cobain from the band Nirvana. That was, to me, was like the first time where I was like, wow, like this is somebody who's at the height of their career.
Has everything.
Has everything, but was also sort of seen as this like, you know, off the wall type of person, you know, based on some of the choices that he made and the people he was around. And, you know, his suicide, I remember, like literally rocked like the world, it felt like. And I remember, you know, that was at the time where like videos on like MTV was the jam.
MTV.
Like,
oh
like
my God.
MTV was actually music videos.
Yes.
And it was like Nirvana was on all the time, you know, and they were just killing it, and their music was really like resonating, I think, with people in their 20s. And so I think when you have somebody who has a hit show like Euphoria, right, and that character is resonating with people, and then, you know, for me, who's raising young adults, I have one of my kids who just turned 24, right, it makes me as a parent not only remember like all of the different emotions that triggered for me when I was in my 20s, but also think about like when you're in your 20s, that's like the time of your life, you know? And so to be in such a sad space, or a space of hopelessness, and what that does to all of the other people who are looking up to this person, not only those who are at this current moment mentally well, but for all of those people who are struggling with their mental health, and people who are potentially pondering or thinking about taking their life and dying by suicide. And I think for parents, like for me, this is like a conversation starter and an opportunity where it's not always easy to bring these things up, especially if you're a parent that doesn't have conversations about mental health very often, but
Yeah.
you are noticing changes with your young adult that is, it doesn't seem like them, or the choices that they're making, things are starting to seem off.
Yeah.
Something like this happening is a great opening to start to have that conversation
Yeah.
with the people in your life that you might be worried about.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking, is that, I think we started this conversation kind of talking a little bit about stigma, and I think it's kind of even inherent in our episode title, right? Mental health often is living in the shadows, and we don't talk about it until it comes into the light in a very stark and startling and challenging way. And, I think one of the things that can be really hard for us is having these conversations, because we're not used to it, right? As a society and as a culture, it's not something that we're getting better at it. I think COVID has made it a little bit easier to talk through, and when things, like you said, when things like this happen. But, one of the biggest preventative factors that a lot of people don't realize, one of the biggest things you can do to help prevent suicide is to ask the question, to ask somebody if they are thinking about it, to have the conversation. The conversation can literally save somebody's life, And it's
very directly.
Very directly. It's
not beating around the bush.
It's not an easy conversation to
Right.
have, because you have to, like you said, you have to be very direct, and you have to ask the question. You have to say, are you thinking of dying by suicide? Are you thinking of taking your life? Whatever language makes sense to you, but you have to ask that question directly in order for it to have that effect, And most people who are feeling, the clinical term is suicidal, right? Most people who are feeling like they want to take their life, it's because they're in, like you said, a place of such desperation that they feel like there's no hope for the future and nothing's going to get better. They're in a dangerous situation. Nobody understands them. That they're a burden to the people around them. But those feelings, we know, are pretty transient. That's like, somebody who's having those feelings won't always have those feelings. And so if we can intervene in the middle of those feelings and give people the opportunity to talk about how they're feeling, that is such a life-saving thing to do. And so I just want to make sure that we're leaving people with like a tool, you know, because it can feel very like, what do I do? Like you said, if you have a teenager who's not acting like themselves, or, we know mental health challenges in youth have been on the rise, and then COVID happened and it made it exponentially so. And along with that, the increased incidence of suicide in youth is very apparent. So it's very important that we all start to feel comfortable about asking these questions in a confidential space, in a safe space. And
if you have somebody, or people have somebody that they trust, you can practice asking these questions, with your spouse or your significant other or your best friend or whatever. If you're planning on asking your child or a person that you care about, you can practice so you feel like your voice isn't shaky. And be prepared to have that conversation. I think the other thing that we've often heard is people saying, like, if we ask this question, aren't we going to put this idea into somebody's head, right? And so the answer to that is 100% no. If you are talking to somebody who has been contemplating taking their life or hurting themselves in any way, those thoughts are there. And if they aren't there, that person is going to respond to you very clearly about the fact that they're not there. And which means that they have a certain level of mental wellness, or maybe it's an opportunity where they say, no, but actually I'm feeling really sad about da-da-da, right? And then this opens a conversation for, a number of different types of interventions, or just potentially just a conversation to say, you can come to me to talk about these things instead of holding them inside. But asking that question directly is 100% not going to make somebody follow through
Yeah.
with a suicidal act. And, you know, I think the other thing just to add is that you should be prepared for whatever that answer is. So they may say no and they may say yes. And if they say yes, the next thing that you want to ask them is if they have a plan, right? Have they thought about when, where, how, right? These kinds of ideas. If they haven't gone that far down the line, then you're in a different space, right? It's just something that's floating around. It's obviously still extremely concerning.
Yep.
But you're
want to get help. Yep.
Yes, but you're in a much different place if somebody is like, yes, I've planned that this place and this time and this is how I would do this. You know, it's all immediate action, but to have some of that information can help you to intervene faster and help to provide professionals in a crisis situation with so much information that sometimes people close up a little bit, especially in the beginning when professionals come in. So if you've collected some of that information, now you're really holding some significant information that can really help people to help your loved one.
Yep, exactly. And, you know, a lot of times people will say, okay, if they say yes, what do I do next? And you know, the answer is really going to depend on a lot of different factors, where you are, who you are to this person. But, you know, some general rules of thumb that we have are, 1, to not leave that person alone. 2, come up with a plan collaboratively, if you can, with that person to get help, right? So help could look like going to see a therapist that they may already have, or if it's a crisis, then you might be calling your crisis line. You know, depending on where you're listening to this from, you might have different resources available. Here in Massachusetts, we have mobile crisis teams that will come to the home and do an evaluation, so folks don't have to go into, you know, a hospital setting if they don't need to. But, you know, I think the other key piece is just to remember that there are people out there who are trained to help you in that scenario, and to not try to take this on your own, because that can feel really daunting.
And I will say that for all of the conversations we've had up till today, where we talk about the podunk pipelines of it all,
Yes.
When it comes to people who are at a place where they are thinking about suicide, people respond quickly.
Yes.
It is one of the areas where I feel like mental health professionals really across the board do a great job. If you reach out to somebody and you say, this is what's happening, here's where we are, here's what I know, I'm with this person, like somebody is going to be to you. It's hard to say across wherever you're listening to, but you know, pretty much people are going to be there very soon. Because nobody wants to lose a life, right? As you were talking, I was thinking about this saying that suicide is a temporary solution to, a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And it's something that I've said to so many people along the way, right? Like you were talking about how transient these feelings are, right? Like if we just think back about our own lives, like we've all had like those relationships that we thought we were never gonna get over, right? And the like job loss that we may have had that we thought was gonna end our career, and you know, the college course that we were like, I'm never gonna get my degree, right? And like it feels like in those moments sometimes like I don't know where my life is going to go, right? And I think especially with young people, like remembering that their brains are still very much developing well into the 20s, right? Until like fully through their 26th year of life, we know that people's brains are still developing. And so even though kids are like, I'm 18, I'm an adult. It's like, that statement just told me that you're not.
Yeah. Because I would proudly not be an adult any day. If I could pass for a child.
Yeah. I would be like, is somebody coming over here to do these dishes?
Is somebody making dinner tonight?
Anyone? Why is it so quiet in
What's
here?
an oil change?
Exactly. An oil change costs what? Yeah. So I think, thinking about that, sometimes I think even as adults, like as we watch young adults get older and go through college and graduate and they get their first job and they're in a career, like we're thinking like they're on their way. But like we have to sort of remember as people who are beyond that state that their brains are still very much developing.
100%.
They're still, listen, I'm still figuring out my emotions. Yesterday I was like, what's happening?
Yeah.
Like it's like my personal belief is that we're all evolving people.
Of course,
right?
always.
But we know scientifically that the human brain is developing like all the way through 26. And so remembering that when we see, we're always laughing and joking about like Gen Z and, Gen Z, I'm so sorry, Gen Z. I'm going to make a Gen Z voice.
I'm offended immediately. I'm offended.
But, like some of those things that we like make light of is like their brains are just not developed.
It's
right?
true.
Like,
and really, honestly,
Gen Z is still developing.
The idea of brain development, I think, is a very interesting thing because like we know that our brains are plastic. We learn new things life is development. Like, we never stop.
Right.
So, I think some of those like hard and fast rules that we put on to try to like create some like structure around ourselves on this big spinning rock can inadvertently cause us to have feelings that, otherwise we may not have. Like if we didn't have the expectation of life being a certain way,
right?
Would we have the feelings that we have, right?
Yeah. I was last night kind of looking up different celebrities who have died by suicide and remembering as I was looking at these amazing people, right? Like these bright shining stars who we've lost by suicide for so long, right? And we remember this about them, right? Like one of the first ones that came up was Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, that's right.
Right? And I was like, oh man, like Marilyn Monroe, right?
Like gorgeous, like
but
such a great actress.
Who knows, right? Like what was going on and just Robin Williams. Right?
Oh, that was rough.
Yeah.
I remember just being like, the guy with the twinkle in his eye all the time?
Yes.
Like, what?
Yes. I mean, and, like somebody who brought so much love and light and laughter to others all the time. And, I think I've mentioned before that one of my favorite podcasts is the Sarah Silverman podcast, and she's a comedian. And she talks very openly about the hugely high rate of mental health in the community of comics.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And there's just this kind of like yin yang to people who are like funny, but most of their like humor comes from tragedy, right? And so we know that's like trauma that people have gone through in their lives, and without working through it, I think some people think like they're working it out on the stage, right? But there's also like some deeper things that we all carry through our lives, right? Like all of us collectively on this earth right now are going to carry through the pandemic trauma that we have all gone through. I don't know if we're still going through it or not. We'll see. But, it's something that we're all like thinking about, I think, and we're seeing it in schools. We're seeing it with people across the board, right? People don't want to be back in the workplace. They want to be at home. Kids are having a difficult time at school, and parents are like, I gotta go to work, and like, but I really don't want to be at work, like, so it's all of these things that have happened. So many people lost folks, there are just all of these different things that happen throughout the course of life. And I think the United States is a very celebrity driven place, right? Like that.
We have our idols.
Yes, this like twinkle of Hollywood.
Yeah.
Even though like it's not the way that it was when Marilyn Monroe was around, right?
Yeah.
I think we see more of the hardened side of Hollywood than we used to see back in the beginning.
Yes. That's to say the least. Yeah.
Right. But, I think when we see people who are seemingly so happy die by suicide, Twitch, that was one that I'm still like processing.
Yeah, like what?
Twitch.
Yeah.
Just like somebody who literally lived their life dancing and like making music and family and all of these things. But like at the end of the day, and I think this is what we always talk about with stigma, it's like we all do things to get through the day, right? Like everybody does what they have to do to get through work or get through church or get through that exam or their class, and then you go home and you're with yourself. And it's so important that we spend time with ourselves, and when we realize like, oh, there's a little something here within me, like that we actually pay attention to that voice and work through that in some way.
Absolutely.
Or reach out to somebody, say something.
Yeah. And I think, conversations like we have here at the Speakeasy will help facilitate that for people, that they feel empowered to have these conversations as we're having the conversations, they're brave conversations, they're life-saving conversations. And, at the end of the day, the more we talk about it, the less it's going to feel weird to talk about it. So,
yeah, absolutely. I think some of the resources that are important for us to share are, the National Suicide Hotline, which we'll have a link in our podcast description for. That's 24 hours a day. You can call, you can text. The 988 is also a call or a text number where you can talk to somebody immediately. There are also so many different kinds of services. We'll put a bunch of different ones that you can reach out to, people can reach out to, just to have, have it in your pocket, right? Like I always tell people, like, you may not need this, but store it in your phone anyways. What's it gonna hurt? You probably have like,
you could send it to somebody who
your
does need it, even if you don't need it.
From 7 years ago who you really can't even stand phone number, still stored in your phone.
Oh my God, anytime I go to search for anyone's number, the names that come up, I'm like,
who
are you?
Right.
Like, why are you in here?
And then we still don't even delete it.
I don't even delete it.
Right. It's like such a weird thing. So it's like, put in these numbers, even if it's not for yourself or for somebody that you know right now, put them in your phone because you never know, right? Like this is like knowing 911, but we always talk about like in a moment, people are like, what's that number that you called to get the ambulance? Right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what were we watching? There was something, maybe it's in a training video that we have where the person's like, what's the number to 911?
Yeah.
Because they're like so panicked. That's exactly what happens in the moment. You just like forget,
right?
Especially if you're not used to dealing with situations like that. So that's a good tip.
Yeah, just it takes a second to store it in there, and that it could be the thing that saves somebody's life someday.
Yeah.
And you'll feel really great about the fact that you took the 30 seconds to program that number into your phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other thing for people who might be watching or listening is that we're youth mental health first aid trainers.
Yes.
And so for any organization that may be looking to train their staff or families on youth mental health first aid and how to intervene, what are the signs and symptoms. We really walk through the steps of if somebody seems like they are not doing well or are coming into crisis mode. But there's also so much preventative.
Yep.
And this is something that we can do remotely. A lot of our trainings, even though they're here right in the same state as us, people choose to do it remote because it's easier.
Yeah.
So it's a great way to give lots of different people the tools to be able to intervene.
Yep.
And I think we always talk about like empower the families,
Yeah.
empower your custodial staff, your kitchen staff at
Yes.
your school or at your organization. Like
Yeah.
the people who already are trained in mental health, they probably already know all of this,
Yes,
right?
yes.
But it's the people who haven't
the
had that
village.
training, right? It's
gotta
the
train
village.
the village.
Right.
Yeah.
So that they know how to intervene and then can say like, hey, let's go to whoever's office, right?
Yes.
And can be there and move a youth through the process.
Yep.
And we're also going to be launching teen mental health first aid trainings, which are actually peer-to-peer support where we train kids that are ages 16 and older within usually a school environment, but could be an organization to help support their friends.
Yes.
So we teach and train the staff there on youth mental health first aid,
Yep.
and then those staff become sort of the leaders for the teens that we teach,
Yep.
the teen and mental health first aid model.
Yep.
And then you're really building your village
Yes.
when you start to incorporate something like that.
All aspects, everyone gets trained, everybody knows what to do. It's just like
Yeah.
a fire drill, right?
Yep.
If you're having a fire drill in your building, you know, everybody's participating, and it should be the same with mental health.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And these are the ways that we save lives and we create change and we kick stigma's ass.
Yeah, we talk about it.
Up out of here. Don't
Bye.
talk about it, be about it.
Bye, stigma.
Bye,
You're not
stigma.
welcome here.
Yeah. So we'll drop lots of links,
Yes.
lots of resources. We'll put the resources or the link on how people can get in touch with us if you're interested in learning more about our mental health first aid trainings. And, you know, every day is a new day.
Yes, every day is a new day.
And Sarah Silverman, who I think I may have quoted before, always says, suicide is the one thing in your life that you should procrastinate.
Yes.
Wait till tomorrow for that.
Yeah, wait till tomorrow for that. I like that.
I love that she says that.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Put it off till tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great advice. Yeah. And then put it off again.
Yeah.
Keep putting it
When
off.
it comes up again, you probably put it off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep procrastinating on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we hope you enjoy the meditation minute.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't yet, please don't forget to rate, subscribe, and review.
Yes.
And we'll see you next time. Take care of yourselves and each other.